everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kay. Today I'm bringing you part 3 of my best fantasy series, finally. If you're just coming across this video and don't know what I'm talking about, I will link the introduction video down below along with parts 1 and 2. For everybody else, we're going to jump right in. I've got 4 more books to talk about for this installment. First up is Prince of Thorns by Mark Lawrence. This is book 1 in the Broken Empire trilogy. Comes in at number 18 on the list. I did not like this book. I had previously tried to read it several years ago. Didn't make it past the first page because the main character is talking about going off to rape a young woman. And I'm not interested in that. This time around I read the whole book and it was not worth it. Definitely not worth it. I don't have a problem with grimdark. I don't have a problem with morally questionable characters. I don't have a problem with gore and violence and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. I don't mind those things. Not at all. But I do mind boring characters. And for me, Jorg is a boring character. He is one-dimensional as far as the choices that he makes, so he's very morally black. And that to me is just as boring as a morally white character because there's no complexity. There's no inner strife, inner turmoil. There's no, like, questioning of what are they going to choose to do. If they're put into a difficult situation, they have a difficult choice to make, what are they going to choose? With someone who's so far on either end of the morality scale, they make the same choice, and it's easy for them to make that choice because they don't have to think about it. That is boring to me. And that for me was kind of the biggest problem I had with this book, is that throughout the entire book, Jorg does not grow. He does not change, evolve, nothing. There's no hint of, you know, redemption. There's no hint of light. It's just he will always make the choice that suits him, that benefits him at the cost of anybody else around him. It doesn't matter. He has one goal in mind and he's doing whatever it takes to accomplish that goal, and he doesn't care about anything else. And it's boring because no matter what comes at him, you know what choice he's going to make. And it's pretty clear to see, it's pretty easy to see. That to me is boring. And that is literally for me probably the downfall of this entire book. The rest of it, because I didn't care about the main character and thought he was, you know, whatever, I didn't care about the rest of it. Honestly, don't really remember most of what happened in this book. I just was just annoyed by this main character. I do know everybody pretty much in the book is just crap. They all suck. They're all assholes. His dad, the king, is a dick. The group that he runs around with are just a bunch of violent thugs. I honestly don't know why he's in charge of them though. Like, he became the leader at the age of 12 or something. And it doesn't make sense, and it's never really explained or like shown why they're intimidated or scared of him. I mean, these are grown men, extremely violent men, murderers, rapists. But they're afraid of him. They're like intimidated by him, and I don't know why. Except maybe because he's not a complete idiot and they all kind of are really dumb and uneducated and really just stupid. And he's like not, because he's a prince secretly. So, and you know, the 11 years before he ran away from home, he had education. But I don't know. Nothing about this book worked for me. Nothing about this book made me want to read the next one. I can guess how the next one ends. But yeah, no. So, can't recommend it. I will try to read some other grimdark though. I'm not taking this to be like the epitome of the subgenre, but I just don't feel the need to continue on with this series. Next up is another dud, and that is Wizard's First Rule by Terry Goodkind, book 1 in the Sword of Truth series, number 15 on the list. Don't know how it's on the list, don't know how it's this high on the list, but it is. I've read this book before, like several years ago, again. Back before I had read a whole lot of fantasy, or especially adult fantasy, so I wasn't familiar with the genre at all. Having now become more experienced in the genre, it didn't help this reread. I didn't think it was very great back then. I did try to read the second book thinking, oh well, that was the first in the series, like it's probably going to get better, you know, as writers get more experience and things, their writing improves. The second one was not better, and in some cases worse, and so I quit, like I DNF'd after a couple chapters. But yeah, rereading it this time around was a lot worse because I am familiar with things. So I think one of the biggest downvotes on this book for me is that it has all the fantasy stuff just like crammed into it, and I don't know why. It seems like the author just took all the tropes and all the cliches and all the stereotypical fantasy things and kind of just shook them all up and was like word salad. I mean, you've got your wizard, you've got your destiny, you've got your secret heritage, you've got a dragon for some reason, you've got your dark lord trying to take over the world for reasons. There's just a lot. You have a straight ripoff of Gollum, which is baffling. You have your poor treatment of women, as is a thing in a lot of fantasy. You don't get very many female characters, but the ones that you do get fit very specific roles. You have the dead mom. You have a seductress sorceress. She doesn't seem to actually harm anyone. She just lives, you know, in her valley or whatever in the forest, wherever she's at, and doesn't seem to really hurt anybody, but everyone's like, she's evil and terrible and awful, and it's like, what is she doing to people but just living out there? But she's also like super sexy and seductressy for some reason. You have Kaylin, who literally runs around in like a wedding dress, and she's a virgin and she's beautiful, and there's just, you have the queen, who is not very smart and not very pretty, I don't think, and therefore, you know, she's like a tyrant, but also dumb. So she's like really harsh on people and things, especially on like the servants. And her daughter's like just as bad, if not worse. There's so many problems that I had. Don't get me started on the weird like side quest where he is taken captive and tortured by BDSM inspired dominatrix types, but really it's just torture. But then he's able to win over his captor for some reason and, you know, undo her entire life's worth of brainwashing and torture that she experienced so that she'll let him go. And it's just like, this is weird and stupid. And that's, I feel like, sums up a lot of the things in the book. The ending is really stupid. There's just so much. I could complain about like everything in this book. The big things I hate: Richard is a character, he's a dick. He's supposed to be your hero, and everyone's like, Richard, and they're all fawning over him, and they all think he's wonderful, and you're supposed to think he's wonderful, but if you really look at the things that he does and he says, he's not so great. The romance thing going on between Richard and Kaylin is awful. He watches her sleep. He stares at her breasts when she's not paying attention. He is constantly just like pining and obsessing over her and going on about how attractive she is, like in his head, not out loud obviously. And even when she's not wearing her pretty white dress and she's wearing pants, she's still pretty. Wow. And also she can like do stuff like heat up water to make tea. And then Kaylin just is very deferential to Richard and lets him take the lead on stuff when he has no business leading shit. Because he's, you know, he's a woods guide. He's never been outside of his little bubble, his little space. He lives in a land where there is no magic. Like, that's the whole point of where he lives. There's no magic. he has like no experience with things, but he gets to be in charge and make decisions when he shouldn't be, because he, whatever. So yeah, I can't say that I liked anything about this book. Even the writing was not good. So there's just nothing I can compliment. Didn't like it. Hated it. I don't recommend it to anyone. If you want to experience the story, go watch the 2 like fairly short seasons of The Legend of the Seeker. It's like it takes elements and parts from a bunch of the books in the series and kind of puts them all together. But it's like campy and fun and enjoyable. Like, it's really cheesy, but it's better than this book, which the book and the author take themselves really seriously. And they shouldn't. Next up, unfortunately, another dud, but not to the level of the other 2. And that is Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. I read The Eye of the World. This is number 7 on the list, so this is a well-loved series. There's like 15 books in the series or something. I knew going in, highly unlikely I was going to like it. I tend to not like very much that was written more than like 10, 15 years ago. As far as fantasy goes, I don't tend to enjoy it. And so going in, I knew I probably wasn't going to like this, but, there was like a tiny grain of like, maybe I'll be surprised. And when I read the prologue, I was a little less like, oh, well, this is actually pretty good. This is interesting. But then chapter 1 is like a huge time jump, like thousands of years time jump. So that was like a letdown. The first 3 times that I sat down to read this book, I fell asleep trying to read it, which was not a good sign. This is like I thought it would be. It's very kind of tropey. You have your farm boy and this destiny prophecy thing, and there's like a dark lord that needs to be defeated because he wants to take over the world and I guess destroy it. Although what is he gonna do once the world's gone? What's he gonna have to do? I don't know. It's just, and then on top of that, apparently the author intentionally structured his book a lot like Fellowship of the Ring, which to me is not a great idea. I don't know. I just recently reread Fellowship and Two Towers. They are not that well written as far as like books go. The pacing is a mess. The characters are kind of two-dimensional. They don't really have a lot going on. There's just a lot, and so I don't know why someone would want to like so closely map their book, because not only does the structure of the story replicate Fellowship as far as you get a group of people together on this mission to go do the thing and defeat the Dark Lord, and they travel and then they get split up, and then you have, your whatever, and there's just a lot of similarities there, but even the characters themselves are very similar. You have an Aragorn analog, and you have hobbits that are not hobbits, they're like regular, like people, but they're the hobbits. And you have orcs, you have ring wraiths, you have your Sauron type character. There's just so many similarities between the two that it was distracting, because every time I turned around I was like, oh, this is like this from Fellowship, and that one's like this from Fellowship, and it was distracting, because I just kept drawing there's so many parallels that's all I was seeing. Outside of that, I had actual issues with the story. I found Rand to be very bland and boring. I thought some of the things were kind of obvious, that they only kind of hinted at or whatever, but to me it was really obvious. I don't know. And then my new pet peeve is when intense life or death situations and things happen in flashbacks, because apparently that's a thing that I didn't know was a thing, but it is, because it happened in Gunslinger, and here it is again, popping up to annoy me. There's a whole chunk where you're with Rand and I think Matt, but I could be wrong, could be the other one. And like they're on the road to wherever, but there's like a whole chunk of time that we didn't see. So he he's like thinking about that time as they're walking down the road. So we know they're fine because they're walking down the road to go to whatever city. But during the flashback, like they're captured and Rand like suddenly gets really, really, really ill and can't move, and they're in danger of being captured again or killed or whatever. Like, these intense things are happening. You should be worried about the characters, but I'm not, because I know they're fine. And like I said, I just recently reread Fellowship and Two Towers, and now I'm wondering if this is like intentional, because that happens in there. It's not really in flashbacks, but you get the occasional mention of like, oh, when Pippin in later years thought back on this and blah. So like, you know, they don't die. Like, you know, they make it through. And you have that with several of the characters. So now I'm like, was this like the author reassuring the reader, like, don't worry, the characters aren't going to die. It's going to be okay. Like, they don't want to stress us out. Personally, and maybe it's because I'm used to reading more modern stories, I like my characters to die. I like not knowing if a character is going to make it through or not. Like, that's something I enjoy. So when you take that away from me, I get real salty. And it really just kind of kills the fun I'm having. And there was a lot of that. Outside of those kind of things, I didn't hate the book. It wasn't like, you know, Wizard's First Rule, where I'm hate reading. It was like, I was just bored by it. And again, that's probably just because of when it was written, and so some of those old tropes to me are really tired because, you know, I'm tired of seeing them because I've, you know, seen stuff since. But either way, I didn't enjoy it. It's fine. I know the series continues and people absolutely love it and are like, it gets way better. But then at the same time, but they're like, oh, but wait, there's like 4 books in the middle, like right smack dab in the middle of the series that are a real slog and they get bogged down and it's like, eh. And then there's a million books after that. And it's like, that's too much time that I would have to invest in the hopes that it gets better. Because there were issues that I even had with kind of the writing and the structure of things, and there was just a lot of problems I had, and I don't know that I would want to try to continue on, knowing I have a big slog kind of coming anyway. These books are very long, and there's no guarantee that things are going to improve to my taste. So I'm not reading any more of them. I have no desire to read any more of them. But a lot of people do really, really love this series, like super love. So I can't say that I don't recommend it to people, but I just don't recommend it to people who like books that I like, who enjoy the types of things that I like, the moral complexity, the plot complexities, things like that. Last up, we get to end on a good note. Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. I read The Final Empire. This is a reread. I've read all of the Cosmere books except Oathbringer. So I have read all 6 of the Mistborn books, but this will be my first reread back through them, and so I've just gotten through Final Empire so far, and I still love it. So I knew going in I was going to love it, hoping that I was still going to love it, I guess I should say, because it's been several years since I first read it. But I did. I still really loved it. I see some of the weaknesses as far as like character and relationship development, but those are not the focus of the story. Mistborn and a lot of what Sanderson writes, it is more plot and action and magic driven. It's not like necessarily always about, and especially in the case of Mistborn, about like super intricate like character development and the relationships, like you have Vin and Elend and their kind of budding romance thing going on, and those to me are not necessarily important, so I don't focus so much on them. Someone who is super into like the characters, and they might not like this as much. But what I'm really here for is like the really cool magic system. The way that Brandon Sanderson can take a trope, take something where you think you know, and then kind of just twist a little bit, turn it on its head a little bit, and give you something slightly different. You don't necessarily get to see that in this first book, but if you read the trilogy, you see a lot how he twists things and kind of throws little bits that are unexpected at you. Another one of the things that I love about this trilogy is the breadcrumbs. So he introduces little bits of information. They're just kind of offhand, you know, just sprinkled in there, like, oh, this probably is just something to add to the world building. It's not necessarily important. By the time you get to book 3, that tiny little thing that was mentioned in passing is like the crux of the whole book. Like, it's super important, but you see the little crumbs that were fed to you kind of throughout the other 2 to get you to that point. And that's something that I love in any book. It's one of the things I always really enjoyed about Harry Potter, was that you were given little bits of information, or little things happened early on in the series, and then those little things became really important later on. And the same thing is with like events or anything that happens. When you can get hints at them early on, it shows that the author has thought about it and planned it out, and then things feel earned. When it finally pays off, it feels earned, rather than introducing it like you're in the 4th book and you just now introduce this thing because you just had this cool idea, and all of a sudden it happens, and it's like, that didn't feel earned. That felt just very shoehorned in, kind of out of the blue. And that's something that Sanderson really does really, really well, is work those little breadcrumbs in, and then it pays off a lot later. And you get that like moment of like, oh, that was way back from book 1 or whatever. That's something that I enjoyed. The magic system, as always, awesome. Burning metals to gain various powers, always cool. You have this kind of heist thing, which I'm always here for a heist. I love like thieves. So that's also a plus for me as a good kind of heist thing, as is fairly common in fantasy. You don't have a lot of female characters here. You have like literally 1. So that's a bit of a downer, as usual. But that's one of the few things that I can say is really a weak spot for me in these series. It's definitely not a series that's for everyone. But I think for anyone who's into like action-driven, intricate little plot, schemey things, magic, this would definitely be something that you'd probably find enjoyable. Like I said, though, if you're super into like the characters and relationships and things like that, might not like it as much. But that's definitely like a personal preference thing, as most things are. So that's all I've got for this installment of Best Fantasy. Thanks for sticking around. Comment down below if you can explain to me the whole flashback thing, because I don't think I'm really getting it. Also, let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them. And I will see you guys next time. Bye!